What does it say about the kind of war we are living in now when one of the world's most expensive, heavily guarded military assets can be quietly reached underwater inside what was supposed to be a safe harbor, without a single missile crossing the sky? Because that is essentially what Ukraine says just happened at Russia's Novorossiysk naval base on the Black Sea, where Ukrainian officials claim an underwater drone struck and disabled a Russian submarine, a development that on its surface sounds technical and niche, but in reality lands like a small seismic shift in modern warfare. According to verified reporting and official statements, Ukraine used a domestically developed underwater drone to hit a submarine docked at a port Russia had relied on as a fallback after repeated Ukrainian attacks pushed much of the Black Sea fleet away from Crimea. And while Moscow disputes the extent of the damage, the fact of the attack itself is no longer in question, and that alone matters. Because for decades submarines have represented a kind of untouchable power, stealthy, survivable, and central to deterrence, especially for nuclear-armed states like Russia. The deeper story here is not just about one submarine or one strike, but about how Ukraine has methodically adapted to fight a far larger navy by turning to unmanned systems. First on the surface with explosive-laden sea drones that forced Russia to rethink its entire Black Sea posture, and now potentially beneath the surface, where detection is harder and defensive assumptions are even more deeply ingrained. Historically, ports like Novorossiysk are designed to be sanctuaries, layered with physical barriers, sonar patrols, and geography itself acting as a shield. And the idea that an underwater drone could penetrate those defenses sends a quiet but unmistakable signal to every navy watching, including the United States, NATO allies, and China, all of whom are investing heavily in unmanned maritime systems while simultaneously worrying about how to defend against them. For Russia, the immediate concern is not just repair costs or operational disruption, but credibility, because a navy that cannot protect its submarines in port looks suddenly vulnerable. And that vulnerability invites more pressure, not less. For Ukraine, this represents a strategic equalizer, a way to impose costs and shape the battle space without needing a traditional blue water fleet, reinforcing a pattern we've seen throughout this war where innovation compensates for material disadvantage. For NATO and Western militaries, the reaction is more complicated, because while Ukraine's success is quietly welcomed, it also exposes uncomfortable questions about the security of their own naval infrastructure, questions that planners in Washington, Brussels, and London are almost certainly asking behind closed doors right now. China, watching closely from afar, sees both a warning and an opportunity, as underwater drones fit neatly into its own anti-access strategies. In places like the South China Sea, the escalation risk here is real but contained. This is not an attack that changes borders overnight or triggers treaty obligations, but it does widen the conflict into a domain that was previously more theoretical than practical, raising the likelihood of countermeasures, more aggressive patrols, and possibly retaliation aimed at Ukraine's own maritime infrastructure. In the best-case scenario, this accelerates a strategic stalemate, reinforcing deterrence by making certain assets too costly to deploy casually. In the worst case, it fuels a technological arms race beneath the waves where miscalculation becomes easier and transparency becomes harder. What seems most likely, though, is that this moment will be remembered not as a dramatic turning point, but as one of those quiet inflection points that only later reveals its significance, when navies around the world quietly rewrite their assumptions about what is safe, what is vulnerable, and what war now looks like in an age where even the ocean no longer guarantees concealment. And the question that lingers is whether global military powers are prepared for a future where the most consequential strikes are the ones you never see coming. And if you found this kind of fact-based, calm analysis useful, please like, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more clear-eyed explanations of the forces shaping our world.